Hello, and welcome to Unitary Designation. Today I wanted to talk about an interesting thought I had. Um, so there's a sort of culture. I don't like the term culture war, but there's a sort of cultural shift dispute that's occurring now in our culture between traditional Western values and a progressive coalition, and this progressive coalition consists of many factions, right? And they have different philosophical critiques of the traditional position that they critique, and they have different sort of approaches and different sort of aims. But by and large, they're coalesced into they can be coalesced into a reactionary force to the conservative, or rather preservative, aspect. One of the ways this occurs is that in the West, we've had a lot of assumptions, a lot of ways of living our lives that haven't come under scrutiny, conceptual scrutiny, for a long time. And when you have things that you've just, like, if you're living in an environment, right? You're a tribe on the savannah. You're living in an environment, and you have certain ways of doing things that you have established historically were useful, like chucking spears, or the best way to make spears, or the best way to start fires, or the best way to preserve food using salt, right? All these sorts of things. Best place to find the bison. There weren't bisons on the savannah, but the point remains. There's historically accumulated knowledge that you sort of tend to keep. And the longer it goes without those assumptions or ways of being re-examined, the more vulnerable they are to attack when they are actually critiqued. Like, let's say you have some cultural normative behavioral pattern, and then it proves the environment has changed, so that pattern is now maladaptive, but you don't figure that out until it comes under critique by a comparatively progressive front, because the newer generation of the tribe is like, yo, the way you used to do it isn't working anymore, we can find a better way. And the older people are like, no, we have this way of being that we've habituated to, and it's proven productive, so leave it alone, right? And so these two tendencies, the environment keeps changing, and we need to use, on the one hand, you have an ever-changing environment, and on the other hand, you have a limited cognitive capacity and the likelihood of death. So you need ways of being that have proved successful before. So you have ancient wisdom, and you have the need for innovation, and those two things are sort of always crashing. And it's the same thing that's happened in every society, in every culture, all human cultures, including ours right now. The critique that is levied against our culture now is deeper, I'd say, and almost foundational to a certain degree, at least by a certain faction of the progressives. They want to tear down structures of economic, social, just normative, like rethink all these things. And I got to thinking about what this means, and one of the things I thought up that I found very interesting was that it is almost like a behavioral immune system. So, like, the left, I'm just gonna call the progressives the left, for sake of ease. The left is like the body's, can be understood as the body's immune system, attacking sort of old ideas, values, etc., right? Old cells, old genetic information. And the right is sort of like, I don't know if I have a model for the right in terms of that autoimmune related. They're like the body's old cells, right? They have their way of being, and they're sort of doing what they're good at, but they're not very adaptive. So the longer an idea is in the body but not examined, the more vulnerable it would be to attack. Just like the longer an idea, let's say marriage, remains an undiscussed concept conceptually, the more vulnerable it is to attack. If someone comes to you now and be like, okay, defend marriage, you'd be like, well, we just sort of always did it that way and it sort of worked. And defend it, like, against, it's sort of like the less grounded it is in the original circumstances that brought it about, the more confused we are as to conceptually why, like, how would you defend it? And it's the same thing with, like, other ideas from this attack, this current philosophical attack, this postmodern attack on our values. We have this sort of like, it's healthy in a way, because the left makes the critique, defend traditional ways of being, and then the right has to, like, sort of reevaluate, like, what are the arguments for our way of being, and that makes the traditional ways of being, assuming they succeed, that makes them way more durable to similar attacks down the line. So if the postmodern critique had come 400 years from now, maybe marriage wouldn't have been defendable as a concept. Maybe it would have been. It's not the point. But the longer time frame passes, when without a society reaffirming why it believes what it believes, the more vulnerable those axioms are. Like, they erode into conceptual vaguity. And then you have to sort of, like, re-ground them conceptually. So that's a lot of what is happening now, philosophically, on a world stage. Is like, well, what are the axioms that underlie Western culture? What are the axioms that underlie, what are our foundational myths, right? What is our foundational myths? How relevant are they? How applicable are they? How biased towards a certain group are they? All these sort of questions that are real and you could argue should be asked. They have their moment they have their re-examining moment now. But just because they should be critiqued or inquired into or asked or tested or prodded or, like, tweaked, doesn't mean they should be obliterated and replaced with nothing. I mean, you still need some form of way of being. You still need humans to have some form of script to follow. If there was no economy, no jobs, no food, no agriculture, foods production, no schools, no shared goals, no value system to compete in, what would people do? Like, so that's not a defense of the West. That's just a defense of, you have to have a system. Like, in order for any coexistence of individuals, you need a system for them to compete and collaborate in. I'm not suggesting that the left wants to destroy systems as such. I'm not saying that. Obviously, they want to hone and tune and adapt the systems to new challenges, right? They want to progress, not destroy. But insofar as you are one idea in that system, let's say marriage, let's say child rearing, let's say capitalism, let's say any of these traditional structures, you would conceive of an attack on you. People aren't ideas, but you would conceive of an attack on capitalism as an attack on the idea of wealth generation, which isn't the point, right? The left isn't trying to destroy all forms of value generation. But it is interesting to note that, to the degree that which we haven't articulated why value generation is important, philosophically, for young people who are lost, who are confused, who maybe are intellectually sort of like biased or trained by people who have sinister motives, and young people who maybe, might be jealous and resentful themselves. They need these sorts of like rudimentary conceptual building blocks. Like, okay, we need to generate value. Okay, I can see that. Why do we need to generate value? Well, because not having food sucks. Why does not having food suck? Well, it sucks because being hungry sucks. Why does being hungry sucks? Well, because it produces negative emotions. Okay, why does negative emotion sucks? Because you have a motivational system in your brain. Or sorry, not just the brain, the whole central nervous system, the whole endocrine system. It's all motivated. Okay, well, why? Well, because biological life tries to survive. So the environment selects for functions that keeps things alive, because the things that weren't selected for, that kept things alive, died. If you're biological life and you're not trying to reproduce, then you just die and you just don't pass on the information. The things that are here now are just the things that were very good at passing on information. So all these things are like, as if you assume that they're just not just obvious, but that young people are of the same conceptual security that you are of those things, you might be misunderstanding, because many of these disagreements we see politically are conceptual confusions. I mean, there are legitimate political disagreements to be had, but the conceptual battle we see between the left and the right, I think it's right now polarizing the political system. I think that has to do with conceptual confusion about the necessity of structure. Like, we need structure, but it's not obvious to people why we need structure. And for people who've never lived outside of structure, outside of homes, outside of food supply chains, outside of electricity grids, outside of Wi-Fi, outside of trade systems that function, it's hard to understand. You might be confused into thinking that that's somehow baseline, that nature is just tamed and there's nothing more to it, like some form of alien or some form of god or automatron supplies you with everything. And you see that with the left and the whole I shouldn't have to work mentality. It's like, well, that presupposes that it's an arbitrary system imposing necessity on you, and it's not a system, it's the world. Like, you're hungry because you need calories. You need to find calories by killing other things, plants, animals, whatever. So it's like, it's not culture making you work. Well, that's not quite true either, because with 7 billion people and hyper-productive agricultural systems, you would need realistically, you would need like 4% of the population to run the agricultural system, if that. I mean, you could just cycle. Everyone takes 1 year of running that. That would be ineffective. But like, if your only concern was feeding humans, you didn't want cars, you didn't want travel, you didn't want cities, you just wanted people in shelter fed, you could do that with the technology we have now. You would need everyone to work for that. But that's not what people want. They want meaningful lives. They want employment, the meaning that it gives. They want to feel productive and useful and helpful, and they want their lives to have meaning. And you can't get that without a system of value and hierarchy. So if you critique the West and the systems that it has used to get to where it is, that's fine. But you're also strengthening those things you're attacking, because the necessity of them, assuming it's legitimate, if the necessity of the Western cultural institutions are legitimate, then any critique on them will just strengthen them, because the real need for them will appear. Like, let's say you wanted to impose, like, let's take the Seattle situation, right? A certain leftist faction was given an autonomous zone in Seattle to occupy, and it took them less than a week, but less than 2 weeks to request food supply from society at large. So, I mean, that's obviously a biased example, because it was a short-term revolutionary movement. They didn't have a long-term agricultural plan in place, but the point is, you can't just tear everything down and then just have everything work. So, assuming your cultural systems, let's say marriage, let's say capitalism, are based in legitimate needs that people can agree on, then any critique of them will just strengthen them to the degree that their need is legitimate. So, feel free to do that. But you should also be aware that as you tear these things down, before they rebuild themselves due to the legitimate needs, there will be suffering, material suffering. People will lose homes, houses, foods, shelter, lives, clothes, etc. And if you're not the one suffering, but other people will take the blunt of your ideas in the interim between the existence of the current system and the emergence of a similar new system, that seems pretty unempathetic to me, because other people will suffer and you will implement something that has the same system. So you should rather work with, you should try improving the current system, or at least deconstruct it and rebuild something that in a way that doesn't harm innocence. For the communists in the 1900s, the 20th century, and the socialists that they called useful idiots, that they sort of used to implement their ideas, the question of human dignity wasn't a question. It was a matter of, it was arbitrary in the sense how many heads had to roll for this utopia to be implemented. And you'd have to ask yourself, are you motivated by actual empathy for the poor, the utopian ideal, or are you motivated by the power that comes from this sort of bloodshed? And it's like, you could say, how dare you ask that question? It's sinister of you to imply such pernicious motives. But then you look at the death counts of the 20th century and you're like, is it? I mean, assuming we agree on how bad it is to murder someone, or someone dying, if we agree on the perniciousness of murder, then it seems that any implementation of an idea that leads to a murder is something you should be held accountable for. So, yeah, the idea I wanted to share in this video was the idea of the left as this sort of a cultural immune system. They sort of attack ideas and attack structural, because we need hierarchies. The right say we have a perfect hierarchy, don't touch it, and the left say, yo, the hierarchy dispossesses people, and we need the right and the left. I agree with this, and I think I lean left, so it's like, but the thought that the left functions as a immune system for the society, I thought, oh, that's smart. I haven't thought of that before, so I figured I'd share that one. And also, that also adds to how things are progressed, like progressive movements. They generate new structures that the right then conserve, but they also critique the old assumptions of the right, which the right then defends. And assuming they are legitimate, they're defended successfully, and assuming they're delegitimate, the progressives sort of move onward, and the right conserve new assumptions. And that works. So you shouldn't be like, conservatives, they want things to stay the same. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, yes, they want things to stay functional, safe, familiar, so that people can have food and shelter and clothes and careers and jobs and, yeah, all the things that we need. They want to preserve that. It's like, but no, this particular issue, and that's true. And there's definitely things that we have kept a hold of that are maladaptive, doesn't function in today's world, that needs to be reevaluated. And that's a message to the right too. You shouldn't preserve things that don't merit preservation just to preserve something that we've always bashed our heads into walls. It's like, well, maybe you can stop that. So your roles are legitimate, left and right. Your roles are legitimate, especially the left functioning as an immune system. But you need appreciation that both sides are legitimate and that you serve a function. You can't be so obsessed with your function that you sort of destroy the function of the system. The function of the system is to maximize human happiness, either by conserving things that work or by creating new ways to maximize potential. But if you're not both aiming for the maximization of human happiness, welfare, agape, like whatever, maximization of human eudaimonia, as Aristotle would say, then you're no longer doing your job. If you just want to win, you just want to progress things to some unknown place where it's even detrimental to human happiness, but at least you progressed, then it's like, what are you doing? And if you want to conserve, and it's like, no, deny humans happiness, then it's like, what are you doing? Why are you conserving something that doesn't work, right? So, like, get that sort of perspective right. That would be my take on it. Okay, yeah, left as an immune system. I hope you like this video and that idea. Have a good day.